the resource link. And there are tons of resources to help you grow your business. You're going to learn about how social capital can help you do that. If you have any questions or need to be connected, look for me in the attendees tab. I'm happy to meet up in the hallway as well. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Deanna Munoz and Edgar Palacios as they present using social capital to maximize business outputs and outcomes. And take it away, guys.
Awesome, Shantae. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here, and welcome everyone who has joined us today. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen for our presentation before we get into introductions. But really want to take the time to thank you for being here. We are open to questions during the session, after the session. I'm sure we'll be sharing our social media and whatnot if you want to connect with us after the fact. But really, Deanna and I, we have talked a lot about over the last 2 to 3 to 4 years about how do we build a business with no money, right? And it's been an insane journey. And so we're just here to share some of the things that we've learned along the way as nonprofit startup leaders in this space, as Latino leaders in this space, and talking about some of the challenges that we face, but some of the things that we've done to overcome the work. And so we're using a big fancy title to really talk about complicated issues, using social capital, maximize business outputs and outcomes. The reality, what we're trying to really talk about today is like, how do we use relationships to get things done in absence of any financial contributions from people, from communities, from work. And so hopefully this is a refresh for some of you, a reminder for some others of you, but really a reinforcement that relationships are key in any business enterprise, and they can sustain you even when you have zero to none cash in the bank. So before we get into it, we'd just love to share a little bit about our leadership story. Deanna, I'm so grateful to have you as a thought partner and friend. Will you share a little bit with our community about who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much, Edgar, for opening us up amazingly, as you always do. I feel like we are back in our Chingona space. It's been a while. So as most of you probably know, me and Edgar have worked together for a very long time, over 10 years now, I think. And we've really built a good relationship and really helped each other along the way. So my name is Deanna Munoz. I am the CEO founder of Latino Arts Foundation. I am also working on the Chicano Art and Cultural Center of Kansas City. I am also the founder of Midwest Chicana brand and podcast as well. So I'm just so excited for all of you to be here. And like Edgar said, please add questions to the chat, because we are just those type of people that we feed off of our conversation with you. And the more you bring, the more that we can, hopefully bring some goodness here to this presentation. And thank you, Edgar, for making this great presentation as well. Okay, was that me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened, so my apologies, but this is the world that we live in these days. All of a sudden, you went mute, and I continued talking, and then everything just ended. So anyways, apologies to all of that. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
We're just pretending like that didn't happen, but Deanna, you were telling us a little bit about what you do, and so I can go ahead and just talk a little bit about what I do, if that's okay.
Yes, you're good.
Awesome. So sorry about that. That was strange. I'm Edgar Palacios. I am the founder of a nonprofit organization called the Latinx Education Collaborative. we work on increasing the representation of Latinx education professionals in K-12. The reason we do that work is because 1 out of every 4 students in the country in K-12 identifies as Latinx, but only 8% of educators nationally do. And so there's a disparity there. There's a discrepancy there that we're trying to solve for a variety of reasons, but really thinking about equity, social justice, and increasing the opportunities and educational outcomes, improving the educational outcomes of Latinx students in our community. So I am an entrepreneur. I wouldn't say by choice. It just, I feel like it kind of happened to me. It wasn't something that I thought about. It wasn't something that, I aspired to. But definitely seeing a need that I wanted to address has inspired me to become an entrepreneur. And I think after 2 to 3 years in and running an organization and really like hitting some walls and learning some tough lessons, like I take pride now in being an entrepreneur. And sometimes I wear that hat. And I judge others that don't wear that hat sometimes. And that's just me being honest and vulnerable in this space. Deanna, I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
110%. You already know that. So,
so we're here to talk about how do we start something, right? Or we have an idea, we don't have cash for it. What do we do? And so, like I tell Deanna, let's talk about social capital first. What is that? And so I went on investopedia.com and I found this definition, which is very formal: a set of shared values that allows individuals to work together in a group to effectively achieve a common purpose. If you're like me, you have no clue what that means, and I don't either. But Deanna, can you hear me? Are we
yes,
good?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're going to probably be doing this the whole time.
We're just making sure because the internet's kind of weird today. But really what I deem social capital to be is relationships, right? I think about often like who has helped me along the way, who has provided pro bono services or pro bono resources, who has actually believed in the organization and the work that we do in order to get things accomplished. And Deanna, I know that you with the Latino Arts Foundation, you've been masterfully like putting together coalitions of people because you've had difficulties fundraising for the organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always go back to, and this is probably just adding information beforehand, and I know we're going to get into this, but going to what I needed and what I needed when I was younger or when I was in the space that people are in now. So I think about that and I put that in motion. So talking to leaders that maybe don't get on social media platforms, or the leaders that are helping youth and they need support, but there's no one here that knows anything about them. So for me, that's totally 110% how I get my income, or like not income because I don't get paid, but how the foundation continues to run is because literally I have little to zero funding from the city, but I do get donations from people around the world. And that is literally how we are still here. And that's due to the fact that people connect to our story and they connect to our why and our how and our what.
And I appreciate you sharing that because you're absolutely right. I think in the first year and a half of my venture, I never took a paycheck and I was always doing side hustles and while I was doing the work. If you hear a baby in the background, just FYI, I'm super proud. My wife and I just had our daughter a week and a half ago, which is always fun to run a business from your home during COVID, have a newborn, and be present in all these spaces at once. So welcome to the life of an entrepreneur. But really, social capital, me, again, as just to reiterate, it's really about those relationships that you build with people. It's about asking people, and we'll get into some tips. Also, just for fun, I wanted to play around with this. I've never used memes before in presentations, and so I want you to brace yourselves because the startup memes are coming. I never watched that show that's the meme is represented.
What?
Game of Thrones,
Okay, I
is that
can't
right?
be on here with you.
Wow. Well, then I can go ahead and just leave. Simple as that. So for all of those of you who are really thinking about starting a venture or have a venture or you're trying to build to that next step, I want you to be reminded that no money, no problem, at least initially. And this cracked me up. You can't lose money if you don't have any, right? Uh, and so that's a positive way of
So
thinking
true.
about these resources, right? Like, what do you have to lose? That to me sounds very privileged as well, because there is a lot to lose when starting a venture, and there's a lot of support systems that have to be in place that sometimes we take for granted as we work through these. But I really want to be thoughtful around this, because I don't want people to miss out on pursuing their dreams if access to cash is an issue, right? Like, I think that people in our community are brilliant. I think Kansas City has a lot of resources out there. And I think that we as a community have to do a better job of connecting our resources to the folks who need them. And so Deanna and I really strive as community members and as fellow citizens to help support and to help share stories and ideas and lessons learned along the way. Because we understand what it is to build an organization from the ground up with no money. So Deanna, I don't know if you have any comments on that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love the fact that you brought up the fact that yes, this is definitely a no lose situation, but definitely not for everybody. You do have a lot to lose, and I lost a lot with the Latino Arts Foundation in the beginning. As well, because it takes a strain on family, it takes a strain on everything that you're about when you're trying to build up something, especially when you don't have the money to do it. And I love the fact that you brought up the side hustle, because that's literally what I'm doing right now, is the side hustle to continue to support everything that's happening with the community as well. And I'm sorry, I have dogs and I have 3 children that are in school, homeschool. So sorry too.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that as well. And I think that we, during COVID-19, we've had to pivot. I've seen Deanna pivot. I've seen myself pivot. A lot of organizations in my sphere of influence and connections have pivoted. And the reality is that there has to be some grace as well. So if you are struggling, if you're frustrated, if you don't know how to necessarily navigate or balance our home life with their work life, specifically if they're in the same space, I want you to know that I feel you. I understand that. And there is a way around it. And if you ever want to commiserate, again, Deanna and I are really good at complaining and listening to each other. And so we extend that invitation out to everyone. If you have any questions, by the way, we're not able to see who's in the room. So we just want to make sure that we're connecting and the information that we're giving you is relevant. So feel free to put that in the chat or let us know, and we're happy to engage with you as well. So one of the first lessons that I've learned, and a lesson that I've constantly had to been reminded, is that closed mouths don't get fed. And to me, that's something that I heard from a friend of mine. Her name is Deborah Jenkins, back in the day when we were working at a nonprofit organization together. And it's a constant reminder that you have to ask for what you want, and you also have to ask for what you need. I think this one is really important to me because oftentimes we as entrepreneurs undervalue the work that we do. And we don't, because we're afraid of either losing business or pushing people away or customers away or our constituents away. We often don't ask for it is what we need, or to cover the cost and a little bit of overhead there so you can pay yourself in the long term, right? Unfortunately, in the society today, for the most of us, we actually have to work and we have to earn money and earn a living. And so at some point we have to include those costs of paying ourselves and valuing our worth in that way. I know that there's plenty of times where I felt like I've been taken advantage of, or actually not even that. I've allowed myself to get taken advantage of because I'm not valuing the work at the right way. Deanna, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely agree 100%. And I am still in the space of learning this. I feel just within the last 6 months, literally the last 6 months, I feel I'm getting better at asking for what we need. Because at the end of the day, I'm working for a community that, a lot of people don't get heard or seen in. And if I have the ability to work with someone who can support our communities, then I need to speak up and say something. It has been very hard for me because I come from a very humble family. It's you just do the work. You don't ask people for anything, and it's been very hard to break that and say no. I really do need help, and I think the people really want to help. That's another thing. People want to help. And that's been a big learning for me, because I think when you're just in this silo by yourself, you kind of just feel like, oh, I'm doing this work and I love it, but maybe other people don't, don't care, or, maybe they do, but you just don't know. And yeah, you just don't know unless you ask. Yeah, that's that. And I wanted to go into the gatekeeping thing too, Edgar, because I think this has to, this kind of
Go
goes
ahead
with
and talk
it.
about gatekeeping a little bit from your perspective.
So gatekeeping for me has been a huge issue when I became a 501c CEO, which was almost 2 years ago now. I am not a political person. I hate politics. I just feel like if you're doing good work, you should be able to do good work and people should support that, right? It has not been easy at all, in the not-for-profit world when it comes to that. Actually, it's been almost opposite. It's been a very crazy roller coaster. So I have quickly found out who our gatekeepers are, because there are many of them and they sit on boards. There's chairs with gatekeepers. But what I have been reminded now, especially by Edgar constantly, is that I too am now a gatekeeper. And it is up to me to ensure that that gate not only opens, but blasts the hell off of where it's at. And that is my role now, because I think prior to this, when I first started, I definitely was not in that space. And it has taken, again, going back to the humbleness and just like, oh, I'm not a gatekeeper. Like, what does that even mean? But looking at the perspective of I am, but my way of holding this gatekeeping thing, whatever it is to not have that be a thing anymore.
I appreciate that, Deanna. And I don't know if this is common across all cultures or if this is something that's specific to Latino culture, but that there is this cultural thing that we have to get over around being too humble and asking for help. I think the way that, especially for me, for my family, the way that we've been trained, like we don't ask help from anybody. And so therefore the road becomes a little bit more difficult. And so one of the best pieces of advice I ever received and that I share with all of you, if you're not doing this already, this is a practice. And by the way, like it's hard to do this work to begin with, but it's the only way you get better at it is through practice, right? And so I'm just reminding all of us, this is practice. We're not going to get it right all the time. But when you leave a meeting, always leave with an ask, whether it's an ask to support your mission or your cause, ask for the sale, ask for a connection, or ask for a new introduction or whatever it is. Always make sure that before you leave a conversation that you have an ask of somebody. That helps so much in kind of speeding things up in the process. And you never know what comes out of an ask. There's been so many times where I've been afraid to ask for what I wanted. And then I just go back into that state of practicing the ask and I do it. And I've been able to meet fantastic people who have been supportive of the organization and the work that we do just by simply asking. And so that's a reminder to all of you.
And I want to add on to that because that's a great thing to say and to remember, because that's something I'm still working on too. And especially when I do my podcast, I have been reminded, always advertise for yourself, ensure people know what you're doing. And like, if you're wearing these earrings, hey, this is where I got these earrings, I'm making them, I'd love for your support. So definitely, supporting yourself by letting people know what you're doing and why.
This one is one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever received just within the last 2 years, but it really sticks with me. The invitation is so important. Deanna talked a little bit earlier about letting people know about what you're doing. And I was reminded by a professor out of Texas, and he said, this is a cultural thing again, but I think it works amongst all communities, is you have to invite people to join you on this journey, right? I know I suffer from imposter syndrome a lot, or some days I wake up and I'm like, what am I even doing? Do I even understand what I'm doing? Am I even capable of doing that? Some folks may not struggle with that. And if you don't, that's fantastic. I want to learn from you because I definitely do. But something that's really helped me out is this idea of inviting people into the conversation, inviting people to support you, inviting people to your events, inviting people to join you in this work, and to be supportive of your cause. I get this a lot with events specifically where I will send a mass email out to, I don't know, 3,000 people. with my understanding that like I'm inviting people to join, right? Enjoy because I've sent you the email. And then I will get a response back or a phone call or something like that. And like, hey, I wasn't invited to your event. What's up? And I was like, well, you're on the mailing list. And so like, do you want a personal invitation? Is that what you want? And so for me, it's annoying, but it's also a reminder that people actually want that personal one-on-one interaction. They want you to ask them to help. And if you haven't made a direct ask for somebody one-on-one, they don't know that you need the help probably. Like they're going to ignore your email. It might go, Gmail's terrible at like moving all your stuff to promotional tabs and stuff like that. It's so important for you to invite your community and you invite your supporters and your non-supporters as well. Definitely when you start with an idea, not everybody is supportive. I mean, at least that's been my experience. And so I continue to invite those folks that haven't bought in or understand what I'm trying to accomplish into the conversation, because one of my goals as an entrepreneur and as a leader in my space is to make sure that I don't receive the feedback that, I was exclusive or that I didn't invite people into the conversation. So I'm very intentional about that.
I am going to say I was on the other spectrum of this before I became a 501 CEO, and also during that beginning part of when I became a CEO. I was not invited. I talked about this on many platforms in regards to, I would get an invitation through somebody else maybe that was like, hey, you're doing great work. I'd love for you to come, and then, but invitations are so important. I think going along with what Edgar said about personal invites, I truly 100% and believe in personal invites. If I know someone in my community is doing something and they would love to be a part of this, or even just asking maybe if they would or wouldn't, getting that text message out, getting that Facebook Messenger out, however you can get a hold of these people to be like, hey, there's this Zoom call happening and they're talking about entrepreneurship and in our communities. You need to be a part of this. Like, tell me if you can. And if they can't, great, that's fine too. But then always open that up to be like, maybe you can't make it to this one, but there's going to be so many more things happening. And I'd love for you to be a part of it. I know there's been conversation where people are like, not everybody needs to invite you, I don't believe in that at all. That is 100% now not how I work. Again, going back to what happened to me or how I grew up and the journey I've been on, I just don't want anyone else to have to be in that situation. I'm like, if I know anyone that might be interested or just thinking about it, invite. It's easy enough.
I talk about this all the time, and that is to practice your networking skills and to network when you don't need anything. And so if you are in a position where life is going well or your business is going well and you don't need to, like source for leads or whatnot, that's the most critical time to continue to network and reach out to people and engage them in conversation. I'm not a big fan of LinkedIn, only because one, it's not something I've ever got accustomed to using. And then two, I get bombarded with messages from people that I don't know, telling me about a solution that they have, right? Or like they have this most urgent need to talk to me about something, and they have had no time to get to know me. And they have no idea of what I do or what I am interested in and whatnot. And so use your time effectively to build relationships and to get to understand the people that you want to do work with. I'm okay with stalking folks on LinkedIn just to see what their interests are, but really start asking those questions. I'm always open for coffee, and now I'm always open for like virtual coffee. If you ask me a question of like, hey, I want to learn more about this, or I really am interested in this, versus like, I have a phenomenal solution for you. You need a virtual assistant. Like, I got that person for you right now. Right. It's also really hard, I think, when you are in need of cash, or if you are in need of money, or you are in need to pay the next bill. Sometimes that can come off as desperate, and that in my opinion and experience has turned people off. And so I recall at the very beginning of just launching this organization, just reaching out to people and like, instead of building relationships, instead of dating somebody, I went straight for like, let's get married. And so people do not want to make those kind of commitments right away. There's very few who do. And so I appreciate those that do and are the early adopters and things. But the reality is it is so crucial to network when you don't have to. And because that way, when you need to, because it will happen, you'll be able to engage with folks in conversations and, casually bring up what your needs are as well. So it's not such a direct ask. And it just feels like it's part of the relationship. Deanna, I tell you this all the time. Like, you got to network before you need something from people.
Yes. And that was a huge, so networking alone it's hard. It just is. And then people are good at it and some people are not. And I'm an introvert and a fake extrovert. I've learned to be an extrovert. So for me, when I started the Latino Arts Foundation, I had no networking. Well, I had Edgar. He was my main networker, but I had to figure out a way to connect with the community that was leading these efforts already. So like Edgar Galicia, Guadalupe Centers, I had to start connecting with those communities so that way we don't want to do this alone. Like, we shouldn't be doing this alone. We should be working as a community to ensure that our community is built. So I had to do it. And it was the way that I did it was I'm a connector. I love connecting with people. And I love meeting with people. So I did like a CEO meet and greet because I didn't know any of the other CEOs out there that were Latino, Latina, Latinx in the Kansas City area. So I just said, hey, let's just get together and talk. And then we kind of made it a community event. And that has been the easiest way for me to kind of grow this networking relationship builder, because you have to meet these people and you have to get to know them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we are all striving to help our community in some way. So whether it works great and you're like friends and you're friends on Facebook, I'm not a LinkedIn person either. I have messages galore up there that I don't get to. Or if you're just someone who maybe it didn't work very well, when you networked, still have them as an ally for you. Somebody that you can work side by side with, because we are again, working in the same community, and we work better in numbers. We don't work well, doing things by ourselves. We need to ensure that our communities are working together. So networking, I am available. I know Edgar's available. I know so many people now that are available for networking. If you ever feel like, maybe you don't know how to do this, or you need some help, or maybe even just that email to be like, hey, I want to reach you out to this one person, and that one person could probably blow you up to like 20 other people that, maybe one of those only work, but at least you get those connections and those, what are people doing out here? Besides me, but, there's other people doing so much work, what else is everybody else doing?
Indiana, I got to say, like, one of my favorite things about COVID-19, and there's very few favorite things that I have about COVID-19, but during this time, I have really realized that I thought I was extroverted. I really thought that I was extroverted, and being in this space, I've learned that I'm way more introverted than I ever gave myself credit for. But I have really thoroughly enjoyed the power of the Zoom link, because it connects me to people from not just locally in Kansas City or regionally. It connects me from people across the country and across the world. I've had 2 or 3 people reach out from places like Argentina, Greece, and Brazil in the last 8 months. And it's been insane to me. Like, that's something that I never even thought about. I thought I had to go to conferences. I thought I had to go and like go to these big events and, and do that. And so I think that with COVID, if you have access to technology and Wi-Fi and you have the right equipment, I think it's such a great opportunity to reach out to people, not just in Kansas City or in the greater metro area, but also connect with people outside of this space, outside of this community, because there are people that are probably trying to do similar things to you in other places. And it's so good to connect with them now. And so I've just really appreciated that flexibility. I know that Zoom existed before COVID. And so I kind of kicked myself that I wasn't utilizing that tool ahead of time, but really it's been so free, and to be able to connect with people from across the country and share our mission or vision of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. And again, invite people into the conversation and tell them about, what we're trying to accomplish and how we can work together to do that. So just
agree. Yep.
It's been a blast in that way. Although I got to say that back-to-back Zoom meetings on occasion get a little heavy. Keep it simple. this is why I love elevator pitches and those ideas. But the reality is, I've been guilty of this. I've been a part of this on the opposite end. If I don't understand your idea, I don't know how to resonate with it. I don't know how I can help you. And that goes for an ask too. If I don't know what you're asking for, and if you're not direct about what the ask is, I don't know how to support you. And so if you need money, don't ask for like, what, I really need your support. Question mark. Say, I need this kind of cash. I need this kind of money. I need this to make this work. Can you help me with that? Or do you know somebody who could help me with that? Be very specific in your ask and keep it simple. I try not to do more than 2 asks per meeting. I always try to keep it to 1 ask, and depending on where we are in the relationship, it's either an ask of time, it's either an ask of talent, or it's an ask of treasure, right? I'm either asking you for your time to continue to get engaged with us. I'm asking you for your talent. So help me write a proposal, or help me do this, whatever it is. Or can you make a donation to our organization? Or do you know somebody who can do a corporate sponsorship or whatnot? And so it's important that you are very specific and simple with your asks. Deanna, I know I've worked with you on this, and you've worked with me on this. Like, we practice on each other. We role play this a lot. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to add to that.
Yeah, keep it authentic. Be you. That has been something that I've struggled with because I always felt like I had to mold myself into what others would want me to be in order for them to want to be a part of what I'm doing. And actually, it's the opposite. People want to be a part of something because of your story and because of why you're doing it. So that has been a learning progress for me and still is to this day because I'm a storyteller. I love not only telling my own story, but I'm telling other people's stories and engaging on how we all weave in together because it's so fascinating. And I think that's why people will support you is because if you're just telling them the honest truth, and I'm very much a believer about being vulnerable, they're either they will or they won't. And the ones that will, I promise you, will probably be lifelong connectors with you. And yeah, just definitely keep it 100% authentic.
I'm gonna get a little technical with this, and this is from a nonprofit kind of perspective. I think this applies to everybody though. This past year, I've been really pushed hard on really thinking about our theory of change. And if those of you who are not familiar with the theory of change, it really is like, how is your idea? How does your idea like generate the impact that creates what you want to change, right? So for me, it's like being really thoughtful about like, here's my business plan, my model, what this looks like. What are those metrics that I'm looking for? How am I measuring impact? And how am I telling that story with folks? And so if you haven't done the work of writing your idea down on paper, it's so important that you do that because it helps you clarify. It helps you share your idea with others and ask them for their feedback. One of my favorite techniques right now is to share my theory of change or share my ideas with potential funders and not ask them for money, but ask them for their feedback. And so that conversation leads to those funding conversations. It leads to those conversations about money because it's demonstrating, one, I really value your feedback and I want you to help improve this idea. It's so powerful because then they feel like they're invested in this work without ever signing a check. And so we all know this, like the more people are invested in your work, the more likely they're willing to give you money. And so make sure that, again, if you haven't written, even if it's on a paper napkin, it is so important that you write your business idea down because it just helps you clarify and tweak and think about it and ideate. I think 80% of entrepreneurship is spent on ideation. That's just me. I wish I could spend more time on execution. That's something that I got to work on a personal level. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs are just natural innovators, right? They're natural ideators. They're thinking about new ways of solving the problems that they want to solve. And so help yourself by writing those ideas down on paper. One thing I also love is phasing your workout. So if you have a big idea and you know that there's a beginning, a middle, and end, talk about phase 1, talk about phase 2. Like, in order for me to get to this part of the work, I'm going to need this kind of support. People love that. People love to see that you have a plan, that you have some strategy around the plan, that you have some community support around the plan. And so it's been what it took me 2.5 years to write down. Well, let me say this. It took me 30 minutes to write down my theory of change, which was 2.5 years in the making. But once I did, it was such a game changer for my organization and for the way that I expressed my needs, expressed the work that we're trying to accomplish, was able to create the graphics and the right marketing materials around it, only because I finally took the time to write it down on paper. I will say I try to outsource this work to others. And the reality is, if it's your idea, other people just don't have the same kind of passion or thought processes that you've had. And so it's critically important that you take the lead in those moments where, like, this is your organization, this is your idea, this is your work. And so being really thoughtful about writing it down and owning it is critical to being successful long term.
And I'm just going to add to that. That's exactly how Edgar got me past that point, because he actually wrote down on a piece of paper while I was at Hallmark in the cafe, my umbrella system. And I've used that umbrella system ever since. I am not good at any of this stuff. I'm a very much, and I love ideas and I love the creation of things, but getting it down on paper and trying to figure out, like, oh, this is, God, there's so much that it's hard. But I do agree with you too, Edgar, on doing it because it is your idea. When you give it to other people, unless they truly, truly understand what you're doing, it can get watered down or changed. And, whether that's good or not good, you have to always go back to that main point. Like, why did you begin this? Why are you doing this? And if that starts to change along the way and you're just not feeling it, well, yeah, you just need to go back and probably do it yourself. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. But at the end of the day, it's so worth it. You're on mute, Edgar.
Of course, it's only been 8 months that we've been using Zoom, so why would I not be on mute? I gotta say, I absolutely hate writing things down. It is not my gift. It is I hate it with the passion. Um, but the second that I can articulate my ideas on paper and share them with people, it just makes a huge difference. So I'm a big proponent of this. And so if you haven't done so already, I highly encourage you to do that, because you will see immediate changes to what you're able to accomplish because of that. And finally, we are 5 minutes, close to 5 minutes to the end of this conversation. But Deanna said it best: "Be you." This is a hard reminder for me, and it's a reminder that I practice every day, which is I am the expert of my business. Nobody knows my organization like I know my organization. And so when I show up to funders, when I talk to people about my ideas, about the work that we're doing, like, I have to own it, because it is my idea and nobody knows it better than myself, which is a little weird, right? Because I don't, it's hard to lead from that perspective. I love community and I love being a part of a community. And so I'm all about collaboration and thinking about how we include others. But there are certain points in your business and your work that you have to own your values, that you have to own your ideas and your thoughts. And so whenever you walk into a room or a situation where you're about to ask for money or support or help, know that they don't have the answers, you do. And so it is your responsibility to share your ideas and answer their questions. And if you don't know, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's a good practice to write those questions down that you weren't able to answer, like on the fly or at the point of the question was asked. But you are the expert in your business. And so approach it that way. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work to do that. At least for me, it does. I don't know if it does for you, Deanna, but nobody knows the Latinx Education Collaborative like I do. Nobody knows the vision of its work like I do. I do my best to share it, and I think people have a pretty good understanding of it. But the reality is, as a founder of an organization, as somebody who's pushing an idea, who's trying to create a world that's different than the one that we have today, like, I have to own that. And that's been a huge mindset and a huge mind shift for me over the last 3 years.
100% agree with that, Edgar. And I would also add in there that your journey is not going to be perfect. And sometimes the imperfect part of it is the best part of it. And I've learned that through my own journey, starting with not knowing absolutely anything, not even how to start a board, like what was a board, to now seeing that the Latino Arts Foundation is evolving into something that is so much greater, and what it has always meant to be, but it took a journey to do that. And I think coming, again, you know, truly authentic, truly with who you are. I feel like when you come to a table and you don't know somebody and you're asking for money, or you're like at this corporation or this organization, when you sit down, there should actually probably be no worry, because everything you're about to say is honestly who you are. So for me, I don't rethink anything. I don't put things down on paper. I probably should, but I come just as me. I come with my story, my journey, my flaws, my awesomeness. Because at the end of the day, you have to remember that you are pretty awesome. Because look where you're at. I applaud Edgar in all his amazingness, because he has been such a role model for me, and seeing where I can go. We have, you know, a similar parallel path, and just knowing that he can do it, I can do it too. You know, it's just finding those resources, finding the networking, asking, and just truly being okay with not always being perfect.
Indiana, that's so kind of you. I think I want to remind everybody that, you know, something that's unexpected for me in this work is that your organization or your business truly becomes a reflection of you, who you are, and your and your morals or values, your ideas, what you're willing to compromise on, and whatnot. And so ultimately, you have to be true to yourself. There's a lot of self work that needs to happen in that space, but that's a whole different conversation. But you know, entrepreneurship is incredibly difficult. It can be sexy, you know, like there is a draw to being an entrepreneur. It's nice to say like you have your own, you don't, you're your own boss and that kind of stuff. But the reality is like it's hours of lack of sleep. It's hours of thinking you did something wrong. It's hours of asking people for money and getting rejected. It's all these things. And so what I really do appreciate about the community that I've built, and by using social capital, right, by building, by being in these spaces with people, and giving of myself to projects and whatnot, is that I have a solid group of people that when it gets tough, I can call and I'm like, you know, I don't feel good about this. I don't feel good about anything. It's time for me to just end and shut it down. And they're like, okay, now that you've vented, like, what's your next step? Like, what are you going to do next? So please don't ever let money be it is a barrier, but don't let it be the only barrier for you to continue to move forward in your business. There are so many ways to get around some issues. Sometimes it involves just asking people for help. And that's one of the biggest lessons. If people don't know that you're in need, people aren't going to give you help. And like Deanna said, and like I think that's Neil Patrick Harris. I could be wrong. I love this. What's your worst flaw? I'm too awesome. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your idea, and the longer you do it, the more you believe in it. I think that that's been my issue. Like the more that I've learned about my work and my organization, the more I believe in it. And so I leave you with that. I know that this can be a little basic, but these are things that I have to practice every day. Deanna, I know that you're with me on that. We're practicing
Yes.
these skills every day. They're pretty basic, but they make the difference, I think, long term in business.
And I just want to leave too that we may have CEO in front of our name, but I think and Edgar will probably agree with this too. What we're striving for is to ensure that our community of leaders, future leaders, are CEOs as well. Anything that will take them to the next level. So that's what we're here for, and we want to be that support system for you, even just someone to reach out to if you need something. So please do so. I don't know if we have time for questions or not. We probably don't.
We're right at time. There is if you want to continue the conversation, I think Deanne and I will jump into the hallway on the Feed Loop website under the networking tab. So we invite you to go over there. If not, I think we'll go ahead and also give you access to our email, and we'll figure out how to do that with the folks at GEWKC. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for taking the time to be in with us today. Deanna, thank you so much for being a partner in this work. And I look forward to seeing you succeed. So thank you all.
Same,
Enjoy the rest of
same.
your day.
Thank you. Bye.